Your goddess has no dominion here.
Hey, ShotDeck family, this is Patrick Cady. I'm very happy that I get to be standing in for Larry today to talk about the amazing visual effects behind Avatar, Fire and Ash. I'm here with Richie Baneham from Lightstorm and with Eric Saindon from Weta FX. Richard, you were just talking. We immediately got off to it because this is so interesting to me. Richard, you were talking a little bit about how you do one part that then feeds into Eric's part, and then the two of you are forever together.
That's true. Well, look, we have a front end process that obviously is building out the movie in a template style before we deliver to our post effects vendors. Eric is with Weta and they did the lion's share of lifting. I think it's over 3,100 shots, maybe close to 3,200 shots of the 3,000, almost 400 shots that were all told, thereabouts. But ultimately, it becomes one team. You know, even the smaller group at ILM, the huge team at Weta, and the group we have here in LA, we have probably 160-ish artists between, working on the front end, between lighting, animation, shot construction, scene construction, and that's all post capture with the a pre and post capture with the actors. So it's an interesting process, one that evolved from 2005's original test, and at the core of it stayed the same, but the tool set evolves. And I think one of the things we learned from movie one was the importance of recognizing, our post effects vendor as the core of the team, and we've really had the opportunity to pull not just the technology forward, but the people. Like Eric is involved, and we from get-go we have Eric Reynolds, who's our Anam Soup, who lives on set with us. Dan Barrett, who interacts with Eric Reynolds every day, and then Jono was the lighting soup, who originally was at Weta and then came to ILM. But it is one big team, and if we can encourage the team to think like that, I think it benefits everybody in the long run.
I think the other thing is different than other movies is we stay very connected to the production designers with Ben and Dylan. They worked with us throughout the whole film. Every time we build a model, we don't just get a design. We actually end up showing them all our designs and all our builds, our models, our ships. And Deb Scott, all the costumes get actually physically built, but then we actually build them in the computer also. So we do a CG version, and then we put them on our CG characters and work with Deb to make sure the fit's correct and they move right on the characters. And so it's the entire team. It's usually very pre-production and then post-production, very separate things. But we work very closely with everyone. And I would even add the sound department to that. We work very close with sound to, if a shot's not working because the sound isn't hitting on the right mark, if an explosion is slightly off or anything like that, then we end up changing something. So it's the entire team from start to finish is very united all the way through.
It's a very unusual privilege in some ways to have communication with every single department along the way. And we talked about it as cyclical collaboration. There's just a loop that goes where it'll loop through the departments and back to stage, and then obviously with Eric and the team at Weta, even down to re-recording sound specifically to accommodate the articulation of dialogue. That once we spot that there's an issue, it's really easy to go back and patch it in. And really, it's ADR is something that everybody lives with in movies, but we do FPR, which is a full face replacement when we need to, and that includes the intonation all the way down to the neck, and the platysmus, the cadence and rhythm of the head movement. That all needs to be carried forward. So it's essentially a complete capture, even when we're just replacing the face, or replacing a new line. It's an involved process, but it allows you to sculpt, and it allows you an opportunity to sculpt the movie, which I think is rare.
And it's all coming from this place of Jim really working with the cast on capturing a performance where I'm in the DJ, so I was lucky enough to see you and the team working with Jim with cast and they were working on a scene that wasn't even in the movie, but they're fully committed to going for it as just as a demonstration. And it was really impressive because I became immediately aware that in a beautiful way, there's no place to hide. The cast has to be there for each other because everyone's performance is getting captured all the time. And then to see the remarkable efforts, especially film to film to film, going into making sure, just like you're saying, like that performance isn't just in their face, but in the way their shoulders move and everything that they gave in the room becomes a very tall Na'vi creature instead of a human being.
We truly strive for a holistic representation of the performance, and I think it's an important thing, that the idea that you look at the relationship between Jim and the cast, and Jim also, I'd say, has that very similar relationship, but that is a collaboration between each of the disciplines, and that tends to contaminate the crew to the point of ownership. You feel like there's a conscious act of inclusion, and that really helps to pull people towards the work. If people feel ownership, they feel pride, and you tend to invest at a completely different level than going in and punching a clock. And it's not that that's the behavior in general. It just, I think there has to be a conscious and concern and discerning effort to include people, and I think that's something that we try to do every day, at every single level and every single shot.
I was watching the sizzle reel, the Academy sizzle reel, and what really struck me was you're kind of, because it's a series of three movies with all this technological development happening, you're in production, but also constant development and prep, right? You're in constant inventing.
Yeah.
And Eric,
Absolutely.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the decisions on, okay, we're understanding how light might diffract through someone's skin, but now we want to see what the muscles are doing underneath our actors and now make that part of the actual performance. A much more open question for both of you is, in such a carefully considered world where you are allowed all this ownership, but also very well directed, how many aha moments are there versus just the slow grinding of the hours? You know what I mean? Which
Yeah.
is very admirable in my mind, of knowing there's something you could make better and just slugging your way to it.
I think for me, the big thing there is your question about the muscles. On the last film, on Way of Water, we wrote a new facial system, and it used a neural network to understand the face and move, to understand the performance much better, and actually capture that in a much more refined way and a much more artist friendly way, so that we could really create that same performance on our CG characters. And on this film, we actually pushed that into the side of the muscles themselves, so we could actually see the instead of driving the muscles from the bones, because that's typically how it's done. You drive the bone underneath, and it moves the muscles and it moves the skin. Now we're actually doing a neural network that we're actually looking at the skin and how the skin moves and the muscles themselves. So the bone's no longer driving it; it's the muscles are driving the bone, which looks at the skin deformation and creates a much more realistic skin deformation over the muscles. And I think it made a big difference because now you get much more muscle definition in the neck and the arms and all those moments that really are helped by that extra motion and tension. Really helped pop out a lot better. And I think one of your other questions was about the technical side of things, where to put that extra information. The great thing of working for Jim was we're able to spend the time we need to do the right things. So for the last film, we wrote a new water solver that allowed us to do those simple things, or not simple things, the big water simulations and the extra detail into the water that you needed to get the scale and to get the interaction and to really make the CG water look real. And for this film, we were able to do it for fire because we needed the big explosions. We need the flamethrowers and the directability of the fire, because fire is not just burning in bonfires. It's coming out of flamethrowers. It's moving up the flux. It's doing all those crazy things that it had to do in the movie. It had to be very directable by Jim.
You're right on, Eric. Again, it's interesting, the evolution of the tool set. And Patrick, you touched on it in the question, which is that do you grind towards an answer, or are there true aha moments? But and there are both. But a lot of it is hard for by experience, shot over shot over shot. And if we were in a very privileged position to be able to do movies 2 and 3 back to back. Well, I know it didn't necessarily look like that for the audience. There was a couple of years in between, but we did shoot the performances simultaneously. And then as we worked through movie 2, there was a lot of challenges that we had, and including the muscles, sort of the simulations that Eric was talking about. That has to be, I think, supported by a tool set that allows the animators and the artists to really interact with it and see where it needs to be pushed and make sure we're attaining exactly what it is we're supposed to be sort of attaining to represent the performance. Coming off of movie 2, towards the back end of movie 2, we really got to a place where the tool set had gone through its infancy and started to mature up. And by the time we hit our stride on coming into movie 3, the review process for me, where every day just got so much cleaner and I think smoother. And I suspect that, seeing it from the outside, Eric, you probably attest to the fact it was the same internally. Everybody was just, clicking along on all cylinders at that point. And it really, really helps to have that cadence and that kind of continuity. And I think a maturity in the tool set and a confidence from the artists that what they're executing is in the vocabulary. And they've had, once you get it, the first 3,000 shots under your belt, the second 3,000 shots are
everyone became an expert, right? Because we had 3 years of Way of Water, and it was essentially the same team that went on to Fire and Ash. So everyone became an expert at all the different things, at not just becoming an expert animator, but becoming an expert at the different characters, at Kiri, Jake. That said, like a lot is said about Varang's performance, right? How she's amazing and everything. But I think even Jake and Natiri, Sam and Zoe, and Sig, they were all outstanding in this film, and they were all just top notch. From exactly what Richie said, they had time to shoot it all at once, and they just became really outstanding for this film.
Yeah, interestingly, I think Sam, you hit it on the head. I think this is Sam's best performance. I think it's the most complex and challenging performance on screen that Sam has
He's
had.
so torn. I mean, and you can read it in his face, which is an amazing thing to say, because we're not talking about Sam's face, but we are talking about Sam's face. Like, that's what's so interesting.
I think one of the things that we've managed to, we strive to capture every day is the essence, the sense or presence of a soul, the inner monologue, sort of what somebody is thinking, or what, or while they're not talking, and while they're receiving information, or how they feel about something. That's where a huge amount of Sam's performance lived, was in the subtleties. And I think he did just a stunning job of challenging himself and raising to the occasion, or rising to the occasion. Interestingly, and Eric touched on it, Varang was truly our really sort of only unique challenge, or new challenge from a character standpoint, in this in movie 3. And she is it's a challenging process to introduce somebody who's such a strong presence in the movie, as a new character. Una Chaplin just brought this amazing energy, and it's heavily sexually charged, which is a choice that she made about the character. And Dan Barrett often says it. She feels like she's at war with the world from the get-go. But when you talk to Una, she never thinks of herself as the bad guy, or the being evil in any way, sort of form. She is doing the right thing for her clan, every day, and she's making choices. And so when you talk to Una, particularly when she's talking in the context of her character, she's like, "No, I'm not wrong." You know, it's like it's an amazing thing to
What other
see.
choices would that character make in that situation, right? Like that's
Well, I think it's you get that kind of sense of, you know, characters, villains can often just be maniacally evil for the sake of being evil. And and I think there's a much greater depth to her character. The dynamic that exists between her and Slang on set, I think, elevated both of their performances. That's another one where, Eric, you said it. This is the best movie, that the best performance from Slang. You know, it's the most complex. They're just phenomenal. They're electric on screen together, you know. And when you put them, you know, obviously Slang's getting on. I'm not going to say how old he is, but you know, and Una's a very attractive younger woman. But that falls away as soon as you say action. That difference fell away instantly, and it was amazing to see them on screen together. Patrick, I picked this one as my sort of favorite scene to talk about.
yeah.
In big part, it's the latter half of this scene, which is essentially what you would consider from a movie construct standpoint, the meet cute. You know, it's rare that you get a meet cute of two villains who start as enemies and evolve to allies very quickly, and then partners over the duration of the movie. And it's very, very credible. You know, you can see both of their motivations. And again, when you get to, you know, the close up, particularly as,
Yeah,
you
when
know,
she comes up to him.
yeah, not to spoil anything, but when he has his little trick where, you know, taking his main rival, the other male in the tribe, that's a strong male, was played by Johnny Alexander. He immediately, Riku gets killed as soon as he shows up. It's like he takes out his competition instantly.
Yeah, with no hesitation.
No, you know, her, well, that would be her proposed suitor. So, you know, he's absolutely stepping into that role. There's a lot of complexity to this scene, that plays out. The fact that everybody else in the clan reacts erratically, and she immediately goes to, okay, what just happened? How can I figure it out? And the hope is you can read it in her eyes that she knows exactly what's going on, and she's like, nice trick, you know. It's like,
Yeah.
there's it in the dialogue, but the hope would be that you realize that she's processing at a much higher level than the rest of the clan.
But this is what we were talking about just before even watching the clip is the performance is fully brought through, but there's this other thing happening too, Eric, where um the artists do have the ability to with these faces, they can get at certain layers without disrupting other things because of the way the system works, right? Is that a good way of thinking about
They
it?
can. And sometimes the reference tells you more than the actual capture,
Right.
because sometimes the capture might be a little bit off. But luckily, Jim and Richie, when they're shooting the performance capture, they put lots of reference cameras on all the shots, so we can always go in and we can see it from lots of different angles. And it is exactly what you said earlier, right? Like every shot is a close up because you never know where Jim's going to put the camera. And it's not like a live action set where you know when the camera is right in your face, because you're set up for that shot. Lighting is done for that shot. Everything is done for that very close up. On this, every shot can be a close up. So we have to be able to match that reference, look at that reference, and know those details, and sometimes add little things that they couldn't quite do, like because their facial proportions and things like that are slightly different
Right.
than a human. The nose is going to move a little bit different because it's wider. The eyes are a lot bigger, so you might have to adjust them. So what we want is we want the reality of the performance, and sometimes it has to be adjusted on top just slightly to make sure we get that performance. We never try to change the performance or go off kilter and do something completely different. We always just looking at what the actor did and make sure we honor that as best we can.
To your point earlier, you were talking about the layers. I was just
Yeah.
looking at the scene as it plays back. Um, striving to keep the subtleties in Una's performance, but also, the sculptural element with the lighting and the makeup, could easily overpower the performance if you're not careful at it, which I think is what you were touching on, and the reality of the depth of that paint, you
Yeah.
know, they're all things that were hard fought for, but finding the balance and keeping the main thing in every shot to make sure that it's communicative, at every level, is a balance that we strive for from the very start all the way to the final execution. And at template phase, we're blocking the ideas and trying to of the particularly the ideas of the lighting. When we hone in on the final cameras, it's down to Dan and Eric and the guys at Weta to really sculpt those sort of the essence of the scene to make sure it stays intact, and the sculptural nature of the lighting and the paint reinforce the narrative, and I think that's at every turn, that's the thing that we sort of hold as the target for every single shot.
But Eva did not come. So I went to the fire.
Well, there's also,
I think the other thing I'd add to it, the ears and tail,
yeah,
um, because you obviously can't capture the ears from a human, but they add so much to the characters. I mean, I've gone through and I've watched the film a fair number of times now, and I've gone through several times where I just watch the ears and tail because they add so much to the characters, in their emotional state and how they get dropped down or poked up. It's like watching a cat. They know their environment, and you can understand their feelings just from how their ears are acting or how quickly their tail is moving back and forth. There's a great scene of Neytiri and Jake, in the Marui, and Neytiri's pissed, and you can tell because her tail is just back and forth, real quick, moves back and forth, and it just adds so much to the performance.
It's an interesting thing that on a shot to shot basis, the emotional state of the character is really, I think, healthily and easily conveyed through those additional appendages. And again, and there is the point of reference is always a feline in some way. There's an attitude that from the body language that I think gets reinforced from particularly the ears and tails. I think are a really helpful addition. That just helps convey emotional state.
well, the other thing I think this is really interesting is that you have these very large eyes, and the and I'm certain there's a section of the way the light enters those eyes which is taken over by physics engines when you're saying like, okay, there's a fire here that generates this, and but there are these really beautiful touches of color changes. If we were going to go to ShotDeck and look at stills, we could look at firelit scenes in the middle of the daytime, and you would end up with these mixed color temperatures.
In this very next shot, I think it is. If you look at we were struggling to get some of the light, even in the early animation days, to get the upper teeth to read, but
Yeah.
as it bounced from the lower teeth into the upper teeth, and just the way to get the separation in the teeth from the lips, just I have to tell you, because obviously I day to day I'm living most of my review in animation. And then when I see something like this coming from Eric's team, and it's just glorious to see that it's not just, hit the mark, but it's plussed up by that type of detail. It's stunning.
Well, it's what strikes me right away when I see these clips is early in that scene before she even blows the medicine in his face. I was like, wait a minute. I hit pause, and I was like, the fire is a back three-quarter, and it's kissing the bottom of her lip and part of her eye in a way that I know way back when I was shooting something on the Disney lot, the animation team from Frozen came over to see what we were doing, and we had kind of confabs between us, and they were complaining about all the things we got for free on a real set, and then I was saying, yeah, but you can put an highlight in and make it invisible and cast no shadow, so I don't think that's fair. Um, but the leaps and bounds that all animation is taken, but to see where Eric's team is playing those little choices. I think there's also a choice in this scene, I would guess, where the sun isn't doing what it really would do, so that the beams come out in a a spread. So they're doing more what we would do with a condor closer to the set, and it's awesome. Like it's exactly the right way to go.
Enough. We are doing all of the same cheats and tricks that you do on a live action set. We employ the same traditional ideas that a DP would use on set. And obviously, Russ was a big part of the live action sets. But I think that Jim, in general, as a DP, he lights his shots light, dark, light, and sculpts everything. So from inception, we are doing it shot over shot, and we will move those fires on a shot to shot basis to make sure that you're getting the appropriate sculptural look. But that's only a gesture. Eric and team has to carry that on all the way to fruition. Eric, you should probably talk about taking light in the final.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting you said that because and it's interesting that you noticed that because that is exactly what it was, right? Originally for the shot with the beams coming through the tent, we put the sun because we can in way off in infinite. Yep, in the right place. Because we can do that. Jim wanted these to look like they were filmed. So instead of that, you put it on a crane just outside the Marui. So it is only 30 meters away, 20 meters away. And you get the direction change as it comes through. It comes down just like it looks like they are just that far away. And working with Russ and like Richie says, Jim as a DP himself, pretty much, he knows how you would light a set and how to hit that light properly in an eye. Richie's team did a great job on the templates we got, which is the early version of each shot. Most of them were lit in a way that was very, very similar to how the final shots came out. A lot of times Jim would go back and look at those and go, no, the lighting here was doing this in a certain way, and we really like that. So we always tried to start with something like that. And then if we can plus it on top of that, then we're always going to offer something else up to just add to it. But it's always coming from a very known position, and Jim knows what all these scenes are going to look like before we ever actually do anything for him.
Well, he's also, I got to see in that demo, he's very conscientious of, oh, this is a night scene. I should now make this the side of the line I predominantly. And so he'll start looking at it with the God cam in that direction. And Richie, you're the one making that work for him in that way of him seeing it on the shoot day, right?
Yeah, we both have stages, one here in LA and Jim's is in New Zealand. We actually do a full RCP pass, which is a rough camera pass.
Oh.
But even that is based on what Jim did on the day during capture. Even he'll go explore with the virtual camera and establish a side of the line and a look. And I often look back to his original A cams and look for the breadcrumbs. So, what he was thinking, what he was doing, and then we'll mimic that sort of style and that vocabulary in our first pass. And quite often Jim will go, I really like that. That works for me. I don't even need to shoot it again. And I'm like, well, no wonder I mimicked one of your shots.
So it feels right in his bones, right? The way he saw it when he was directing
exactly.
it.
We are consciously mimicking a style and a vocabulary that Jim has I think evolved and developed through his whole career. Whether he likes it or not, he has a very, very distinct style. And it for me, to describe Jim's style is really about readability, legibility, making sure that you do not have to explain in some constructed, narrative way what's going on. You should be able to read it instantly, visually, and I think that's something that he keeps at the forefront of his work, and it's something that we try to impart to every member of the team.
Yeah, I
What's
think
this shot about?
exactly.
I mean, that's what he always says, right? What's this shot about? Is it about the big explosion? Is it about this? Is it about that? It's fun. It's funny because there's always something about the shot that Jim is thinking, and like there's a great shot in Natiri in the end in the third battle when she's getting abused a little bit from Varang, and she's on her knees and she's leaning back, and the baby is in the little pouch in the front of her. And we watched that shot the first time and we didn't really think about the baby. It's there, but you didn't think about it. And you thought it's a great shot of Natiri getting her ass kicked. It wasn't for him. That shot was about showing the audience that the baby was still there and okay, so that he could put the audio cue of a baby crying in. So there's always something that the shot is about that is in his mind, and as long as we know what that is, um, all the way across the board, then we're gonna do very well with that shot when we show it to him.
Whether it's right or not, I've always felt from T2 on is Jim saying cleanliness is next to godliness. Like, we'll lay miles and miles of cable if we need to, so that you can see this helicopter chasing this truck. Like, that's what we're doing.
I think visual cleanliness is a really, really succinct way to say it. And that's again, and there's nothing muddy about Jim's images ever. I mean, it's just the immediate read. Jim often says, if you have to, look at it in an airport on a screen across the room, if you can make it read there, then your job well done. So it is about keeping your audience with you the whole way and taking them on a journey. I think Jim does an amazing job of that, and I think that our crew in general, the more and more you get to work with the same crew and mature the crew up, the less you have to say it. It's like the more people just honestly bring that to work with them every day.
He also does it from shot to shot, right? It's not just every shot. It's when you watch his films, your eye is in a certain spot in a shot, and when you go to the next shot, you're not getting tired watching a 3 hour film, because your eye is usually being directed properly, and looking at the same spot or very close to the same shot. And even in stereo, in depth itself, when you watch a Jim movie, your eyes aren't jumping from one depth to another depth to another depth. And usually when you watch a stereo movie, that they don't think about things like that. It's real hard to watch, and by the time you're done, your eyes hurt, your head hurts, everything just doesn't feel right. And Jim, he controls that through the movie, and he understands that you don't want your eyes bouncing all over screen from shot to shot, and you'll miss the action if that happens. So he just understands film in a way that a lot of people do not.
Yeah, and I feel like the 3D part of it is just extra showing off on his skill set. Let's play the River Rapids scene, because I know that's another thing you both wanted to touch on. The action scenes, the ability to follow the action scenes, to have that sense of, and I think this is a mark of all great directors. Spielberg is pretty good at it too, is that, like, I can feel it's chaotic, I can feel everyone's in danger, but I know where everything is and what the stakes are constantly.
And not having to do it by cutting to a geography shot to show you over the head. It's like,
Right.
but the embedded information in each shot. And Eric said it earlier, which is that making sure that the background is appropriately in sync, continuity wise, and reinforcing the idea. Jim, one of the things we often do in shots, we'll show, if we have a certain amount of screen time with actions, we'll often show the beginning, middle, and end of the same action in 3 different moments, but stacked in the same shot. So you get an instant read again. Like, if you don't have enough screen time, it's a great way to get around, an action, taken to its fruition by just, mimicking or allowing your audience to see it resolve in the background of the new shot. And it's a really good kind of, I think, habitual filmmaking need to communicate, which Jim literally encourages every day.
And it's this combination of, they're trying to escape, they're dealing with the rapids, but we also are very aware that there's a breathing problem going on too, and that's not we got to remind the audience. It's just happening in the middle of all the other, when Spider's apparatus is is failing.
Mhm.
Like that's just blended in with everything else.
We should give a shout out to JD Swarm and Richie Swarm and the practical crew here because they built a tank that allowed us to capture all of this in a real world situation, which is an actual flume with rapids. And that went a long way to, then having to reproduce it in live action with Eric and the team down on set. Knowing that the additional pieces would fit together, particularly when we got our troop, our very brave troop as well, also needs a shout out. They're each one of the performances here are a combination of the original performances of the actor and then the actors we had in this flume, and to represent photographic elements. So there's multiple shots that are cutting from fully CG shots to live action plates combined into with the CG elements. And that's again a testament to Weta's skill to make that look like it's got flawless continuity.
I mean, a lot of these shots, like there's a couple shots of Spider in here where using that pool that the special effects team built in Manhattan Beach, we were able to shoot Spider or Jack Champion in rapids with that water and get all that detail. And then we had that as reference so that we knew building the same sort of set, putting the rocks into the CG set and the walls and everything. We were able to just dump water down it hundreds of times until we actually got something that looked very, very similar to the live action version of it. And I'm hoping that when people watch these shots, they don't know which ones are full CG and which ones are live action, because when I watch them now, I have to double check sometimes and say, oh yeah, well that one was real. Oh, this one we sort of used part of Spider, but then replaced other parts of him. And I think with the because Jim gave us this extra time to build these tools and to allow us to match the water so perfectly and actually shoot reference for the water. I think it's what really helped us to understand it and build it in such a way that that you don't know, and that we can use the performances of the troop and of Jack in such a realistic way that it just sells the fact that they were in this crazy environment, which, I mean, honestly, they were. The troop and Jack went down this great rapids. It looked like a lot of fun, but it did bounce them around a lot, and it was pretty full on.
Well, I tell you this, Eric, it's a testament to the quality of work because I know, as do you, which ones are which. And when I watch it, I still have a hard time pulling out which ones we ended up with actual elements, which ones were plates, and we divide it into all CG plates and elements. And there are elements that are pulled into some that are photographic, but there's huge amounts of them are all CG. And again, like you would have to go back and look at them, break them down to recount exactly which one is which. So it's just an unbelievably stellar job by the group.
Oh yeah, and you just don't doubt a frame. Like, and yes, you're dealing with freaking water.
Yeah, you're right, Eric. In all of that in stereo.
Oh my God. Right.
So it's not only just faking the water, it's making sure the water is exactly the same in both eyes and fits
Right.
properly, and it's the whole thing that you don't think about. You don't think about that for interaction also, right? There's a lot of interaction with Spider and the CG characters in this film. And it all has to be done exactly right because it's all done in stereo. So you have to understand those contacts and all those intersections between our CG character and our live action character.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interaction.
But when you think about all of the traditional cheats we would do for integration in a 2D world, most of the cheats that you can get away with are blown up by stereo. They just your vocabulary is clipped immediately as soon as you go to stereo.
Well, thinking of Eyeline to 9 foot tall creatures in three-dimensional space, you have a very unique solution, which is pretty wonderful, but it must save your bacon, Eric, when you're then trying to put that all in a 3D environment.
Well, the Eyeline system that Richie and the team down at LEI came up with,
I have to
which is
give credit there to Ryan Chat, myself and
Ryan Chabney.
Myself and Ryan Chapney flew to Ljubljana flew into Ljubljana and drove over the Alps. I think 2011, maybe something like that. And we met a guy in a shed who had a winch system. This preceding your sky cams, which now are, I mean, they're second nature at sports events. You know, the idea of being able to control a camera head in, real world space. Well, the idea at the time was, could we take a data set that it was Sam from the first movie getting up off the gurney. We took that set, we flew there, we built a little set, and basically what we were trying to do is we knew that it could display spatially correctly. The question was, could we tie it temporally, and where would you have to give up? So it doesn't only have to be in the right space, but it has to be in the right time. And that's really what sort of nailed it. And Ryan immediately sort of got to work with, when we got back, with how would we tie it down temporally, and what would we give up. And once we got that system working, then of course Jim, being Jim, goes, okay, now it moves through space. Can it talk to us? How about a monitor and a speaker that looks at you? Like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, like, of course. Of course.
Perfect.
The tennis ball's not enough.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
to the space, it's not. That's not enough. But Jim was right.
I think it made all the difference, though.
Yeah, it helps the motivation.
Yeah, I mean, Spider in the cell, right? He's interacting with Slang because he can see Slang's facial performance happening, and he's not just looking at a tennis ball and trying to pretend like he's doing the right thing. He's actually interacting with Slang's performance, and it gets him looking at the right place, because I mean, Slang moved around a lot in such a small space. He moved around a lot, and his eye line was close to him, which is real hard to do. When someone's eye line is sort of further back, like put him 10 feet back, it's sort of easy. You can get away with an eye line that is that far back. But when it's 2 feet from you,
bigger the throw of the frustrum, the more forgiving. And as soon as you get into that small space, if it's off by a couple of degrees, it shows up really quickly. And in fairness, like I said, Ryan Chapney and team, I think it was Vaughn Cato, who wrote the hooks that would take the translation in space and then tie it back from the character and tie it back to driving the rig, a winch rig, to displace the camera in space. And once that was working, we had a couple of ideas real early, where we had drones, small drones with protective cages, and we got really close with them as far as temporal displacement and the appropriate scaled displacement of the character. But then you're dealing with the noise of the rotors, and it destroys your sound, and now you're back to you have to ADR the whole character again. So it's like, okay, where's the value? You gain something, but you're giving up something. So I think the winch system, or the Eyeline system, is, and again, Casey shots on set would program it each, shot over shot, and get it to work. Wow. And go in and calibrate instantly each time it has to be a new zero position. Casey'd have to go in and make sure that he understood the delta of the character at scale in that particular environment. And he's a machine. Again, hats off to guys like Casey and Dayon and Ryan, who are just, we lean on all the time. Then they are just unbelievable technical wizards. Just, it's amazing to have part of the crew.
They also have to think about all of the other things going on set, because it's not like a set has just a couple things around, and it's not only what you see on camera. It's lights everywhere, it's microphones, it's all the other stuff that's happening, and they have to make sure that rig isn't going to run into anything else or hit anything in a weird way, or there's a lot of calculations that need to be done ahead of time. So I'm glad we have lots of people that understand math in a very fluid way.
Well, Casey did a tech viz where he lidars each of the sets in advance, and then assumes the the hang and the drape of every wire and where the central displacement of the camera mechanism is, so that you can basically get any interrupted lines and clear them out. It's just
Wow.
it's
That's really fantastic. And now you're production designer and everyone is still, because they've gotten so good at this very specific job, they can still stay free with like, well, no, this contraption would come into the set this way. And they're not being told, no, we can't do that because the cables, they're like, no, okay, then we got to come at it this other way.
But I think that we talked about it earlier. That cyclical collaboration between, from the very inception, when Ben is designing, and we build them all in CG, the sets, the hard surface sets particularly are the ones we interacted with in that respect. We build a full tech viz, and then Casey will go back and say, well, this won't work. We need a breakaway wall here. And then you can also very quickly, it's one of the things I'm surprised hasn't been adopted more widely in the live action world. It's to build stuff in CG, which you're doing anyway, and stand it up and block your scene and understand, sort of, even with a troupe, to basically understand what can you get away with building. The portion of the set that can be built and what's going to be extended in CG because of the necessity to do it for other shots can be identified fairly early in a process, and you really can get to a very succinct build on a set. And it's not that it's any less work to design. It isn't, and it's not necessarily even less work to build a smaller piece of it. Maybe it's more complex, but what it is there's a real value in the time, energy, and effort that between the integration of the CG and live action that happens on the back end. That is going to happen anyway. It's like so. But look, we're in a very fortunate position. We get to work with our post effects vendor so early that we get to make these decisions and pull the work forward in the pipeline. Not everybody does, but I would say there's a very, very healthy thing that could happen in the industry where involving the post effects vendor, or at least identifying them early and getting them involved, is just it's a windfall when you get to the back end of a movie, particularly a heavy effects movie.
I thought for sure when volume started taking off that we would all need we'd need to know basic Unreal, how to communicate in Unreal, and we'd all have goggles at home to do just this, to talk out coverage, sets, lighting, openings for lighting, all these things. Because I thought like, well, that's really smart. Even in a gray space environment, you could learn a lot without spending too much money with just the creatives.
I think there has to be an attitude change in the industry. You got to, production has to see the value of it up front. And look, the old school way was to protect the budget up front and spend it all on the back end because effects are going to be expensive, and you always are assuming overages. And I think it's a very poor way to approach it. If you integrate the effects of it from the very get-go, there's a value proposition there that says, well, you're going to build it anyway, build it early, identify it, and use it at every possible opportunity on the front end, and as you're prepping. And then, but that's, sometimes it falls on deaf ears. It takes a long time to turn this ship.
It's always a conversation too, right? Like if the production designer is talking with the visual effects house, and they understand we're not always going to keep everything that's built. Like in a lot of films, they overbuild and we don't end up keeping things because you have to integrate them in a certain way, and there's certain things that just don't work. So if we're talking early, we can go through that process and we understand, hey, don't bother with this because we're not going to see it, or don't do this. Or put more detail here because it's going to be real hard for us to add that later. And if we're spending the money in the right spot, then every dollar goes to the film, not reused or done again.
We should be wrapping up, and I feel like I love asking this question, and I'm really excited to hear your answers. What is something you would tell your younger, like just getting excited about filmmaking, your younger version of yourself, if you could go back in time and give yourself advice?
I think not to be afraid to make mistakes. Assume that everything is going to change, and embrace the change. That is sort of the only way to stay on top of it, is to adopt and adapt. But again, I think you learn as much from a mistake as you do something that's successful, probably more, if I'm being honest. And so on the film side, particularly not being afraid to make a mistake, and really encourage that active inclusion. Go and talk to people on set, and make sure that you look at where the win is. Where can you value a relationship? Because, and again, this, I'm going back to when we started, and on set, live action sets, particularly the effects 20 years ago, the effects crew were the red-haired stepchild. You were an afterthought. It was, fix it in post was a very dangerous thing that you heard on set every day. But I think, yeah, be aggressive about that relationship and go, hey, lads, let's have a conversation. Let's understand where the win is.
I think that's a good one for everyone, right? I had my daughter come and she worked catering for one of our pickups, and the first thing I told her was exactly what Richie said. Go and talk to everyone. Like, go talk to every single department, talk to the props, talk to the makeup, talk to everyone, and just see what they do. Ask them what they do, and sit with them and watch what they do, and see how it's something you might want to do or interact with. I think what I would tell myself, if I knew I was going to get into this, is to broaden my knowledge base earlier on. Like, take more photography classes for learning how to light and for composition. Take maybe an acting class so I understand animation better, because I'm a terrible animator. And if I understood acting better, I might understand animation better, how movement works. And even take some. I would take less software classes, understanding particular software, because the software is always changing. It's the underlying knowledge of how things need to work, not the button you need to press on a certain software. Because next week a software is going to change and that button's going to move somewhere else, and it doesn't matter. It's understanding the process and understanding filmmaking that I think would help. It would benefit a lot of people coming through the industry now too. And I think that's what we always try to share with people coming in, the younger kids coming in, is understand the process, not where the buttons are.
And I think that's really tough for them, because it's easy to learn where the buttons are, but it's tough to understand. I want to get across this emotion. Like, it's the simple stuff that's the hard stuff, right?
But
Exactly.
that's you back to the fundamentals of storytelling, and the fundamentals of filmmaking is, if you learn how to craft the narrative, if you learn how to communicate, that is I often say it to the group, particularly when we have large groups of film students, and ask them what they think their job is. They'll usually sort of describe what they want to be part of a department, and even down to the animators who come through, and they'll say, their job is to bring something to life, or they're animators. And I'm like, fuck this shit. You are. Can I curse on this? I don't know if I can.
You are now. I don't see why not.
But
We'll beep you out.
to get all that, it's like your job is a storyteller. You get out of bed in the morning, your job is to communicate. That is, if you keep that at the forefront of everything you do, you'll be fine. You'll survive every single change, because that's the thing that isn't changing. The fundamental need to tell stories and communicate. That is at the heart and soul of everything we do.
Is that still what gets you excited today? Is there an aspect of that you think about more now than you maybe didn't even think about 5 years ago, that keeps you excited about doing it?
For me, coming up, via traditional animation, hand drawn, and then into CG, and being constantly told that that's the dark side, but that's the lovely discovery that there's as much to communicate through lighting as there is in the. I often break it down into text, subtext, and inner monologue when I talk about performance, which is, text, the actual words we say make up very little of the communication. It's maybe 5 or 10%. 95% of what we say is in the subtext and in the inner monologue. How do we feel about it, and what is our emotional state? It's the, what time is it? What time is it? It's like you can go, I'm fucking so bored. What time is it? And it's the same text, a completely different thing, straight away. That idea, being expanded to every other discipline, being learning that the language of the camera, is a massively communicative tool. The language of the lighting, the language of the atmospheres, the environment, and the overall how you sculpt them all together in an individual image. I think that's the thing that gets me excited. That's the opportunity. Every single day is an opportunity to do something different. To further the story with a different tool.
It's pretty juicy.
It is.
Eric, what about you? What's getting you excited now that you maybe even weren't thinking about too much 5 years ago?
It's always just coming up with something new, right? It's always the story, but it's also the coming up with new ways to do things, new ways to tell that story, new tools, new ways of working that might help us with those things. Like another thing we did was live depth compositing on this film, right? Which allowed Jim to see the live action characters and the CG characters in the proper depth. So if it was a big group of characters, you'd see them in the proper depth as he watched it shooting the cameras. So it's things like that, that live compositing of putting characters in the right space, or any number of other tools that we came up with that they're just exciting to play with on set. And I mean, some of them worked great, some of them they were awful. And they were good tries, but and we learned as much from those as we did from the things that worked really great. And it's just fun always coming up with something new. And Jim is like a kid in the candy store when he gets something new like that. Like you show him something new like that, and he's like, "Ooh, and now we could use it for this, or we could use it here, or we could use it here." And it's that excitement that everyone brings across these films. It's just so much fun to do.
Jim is definitely a man for a challenge. There's nothing like a red rag to a bull, which all you got to do is say it can't be done. That is Jim's red rag.
You can't do a CG movie that's full of water and fire. That's insane.
Try say no or can't. It's like it lights a fire for some reason.
Oh, yes, it does.
But he must love the two of you for the continually coming up with the house, like,
Well, I think that's the fun
and
part.
because you're interested in the why. I think that's why that it seems like these relationships are so strong, is the story is the why, and then you're figuring out the how, but you're attached to the why.
I think the relationships. I mean, if you look at like our crew in general, I've been doing this with Jim for 20 years. Eric, you've been what? You'd be 18-ish, I think, something like that.
A long time.
But that runs right through the crew, and so that kind of constant challenging of what has to be solved allows the crew, all be much older now, maybe slightly jaded, but to stay fresh and engaged. It's like it's a necessity.
I think there's less jaded than you think. We did a crew photo with Jim not too long ago, and we brought all the people that were still at Weta that worked on film one, and they all sat on the bleachers, and there was still a fair number of people. And then film two was a lot of people, and then film three even more. And then Jim goes, "You know what we should do now? We should do a photo with everyone that is willing to work on 4 and 5." And everyone that was there got up and sat back up there again. Everyone was happy to go again. So I think the crew really enjoys the process and the challenges.
Thank you so much. This has been really wonderful, and I love the sense of it's the same feeling you get, or I felt working on little, $1 million movies when I was starting. It's just the group is, to a logarithmic scale bigger, but to have that sense is really strong. That's really powerful stuff.
That's a really interesting thing you said, Patrick, which is that we've often said ourselves, we are the biggest guerrilla movie ever made.
That's perfect. That's exactly what you want.
Oh, it's
Yep.
fun. It's fun.
Really, really nice meeting you both. Richard, really nice actually getting to hang out with you today after seeing you at work before the holidays. And Eric, thanks so much for joining us for from your
Thanks
backyard.
for having me.
Oh, of course. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and evening.
You guys.
Bye, guys.